All right, hello and welcome to the first ever live session of the Do the Work Lab. I have Annika, rather than being on Zoom, next to me here with our perfect little TV setup. So hopefully this records all right, and we've got a lovely little microphone here as well, picking up everything, fingers crossed. So what we've got for you today is a slightly different variation on what we normally do. Obviously, we know what we're doing. We're going to be discussing top 3 tips for 3 different topics from myself and then from Annika. And we're kind of going to go on the you go, I go sort of way around it. So without further ado, should we get cracking?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So I'm going to come to Annika first, and I'm going to come to you. So your top 3 tips for creating more confidence and self-belief.
So this is something that, I suppose just to preamble the 3 tips, this is something that I work with a lot of people on. And so these tips are going to be a combination of some really practical things that I recommend you go and try, as well as maybe just a few things to think about. So when we think about confidence, it's important to sort of define what we're talking about. In this case, I really like to define confidence as the belief that we can do hard things, or we can rise to or meet the challenge that's in front of us. So if we want to be able to rise to or meet a challenge, what really helps us feel capable or able to do that is to have a strong sense of what our strengths are and what we're actually good at. So we're typically really bad at acknowledging what we're good at. In fact, whenever I ask people to do this, they get a little cringy and squirmy because it feels really uncomfortable. But it's actually a really important part of confidence. So if you want to be able to say, yeah, I believe in myself that I can go and do this hard thing, but we have no sense of what we're good at, what our strengths are, then there's kind of this big gap between the challenge and what we can do. So what I recommend is a simple exercise is grab a pen and paper, sit down and challenge yourself to write a list of all the things you can think of that you are good at. And I know this will feel incredibly uncomfortable at first, but you never have to show this list to anyone. This is just for yourself. And it's an interesting exercise because it really forces you to kind of come face to face with that discomfort that we have around just acknowledging what our strengths are, what our skills are, and what we're good at. And when we do that, and it's important, by the way, that you write that with pen and paper, and because that helps to sort of implant those ideas, those new thoughts into our brain. What happens is then when we find ourselves in challenging situations, we can more easily call to mind the things that we're good at and the strengths that we have, and we can more easily think about how can I leverage those strengths in order to meet this challenge. Or remember, oh yeah, I've done this before, or I have experience with this or a similar situation, and I can apply that to what's feeling difficult now. So that's a pretty practical thing. I encourage everyone to give it a go, even if it feels a little weird. Tip number 2 is to really start to think about confidence as a skill. It's something we have to intentionally practice. It doesn't just appear overnight. And so if you take that on and say to yourself, okay, if I want to be more confident, then I need to practice this, then that means actually making a commitment to yourself to start catching your own thinking. So whenever you're thinking things that make you feel bad about yourself or seem to emphasize why you can't do things, challenge that, change it, create a more positive dialogue with yourself, be your own cheerleader. And you've got to commit to practicing that. And the third thing is kind of a tag on to the second one, which is in a similar vein to practicing challenging your thinking. Start getting out there and doing more challenging things. Start saying yes to things that you're not sure that you can do. The more we practice doing tough things and persisting through challenging things, the more that we prove to ourselves that we are capable of doing tough stuff. So yeah, so those are my 3 tips, and encourage everyone to really think about applying and practicing for those ones.
Yeah, I mean, I really like the practical side of writing things down. I think for me that rather than just thinking about something, sometimes writing it down physically and seeing it and having those lists of maybe things that you've done before, and then also referencing back to all the things that you've done before, right? As a in your line of work, say you you might be really good at that and you've got loads of promotions, but for some reason, health and fitness, you think, oh, I haven't got the confidence, so I can't do that.
Yeah.
So you've done hard stuff before, it's just a case of being willing to be a bit uncomfortable as you progress through it, I guess. So yeah, I love it.
Cool. All right, so moving on to you. So top tips for dieting.
Top tips for dieting. So we're going to relate this in the form of weight loss, because that's what most people listen to this are aiming at. So
Great.
for me, tip number one, and it overarches most of these things, but have a goal around it.
Yeah.
So and make it specific. So have a goal and make it specific will be tip number one, because if you just think you're going to diet because you want to, you need to eat a little bit better, you need to drop a few pounds, the likelihood of you being able to apply any level of meaning or necessary like kind of willpower, if you will, to actually diet, it's going to fall on deaf ears, because you're going to go back to what you did before. So I think making a commitment and making it specific in terms of a goal is important. People come sometimes like, I just want to lose weight, I just want to lose or drop a few pounds, which is, for me, it's not specific enough. So it doesn't need to be super pressurized in terms of I need to do it next week or I need to do it right now.
Yeah.
However, if you go into, I think, anything without a specific goal, then you're going to struggle to stick to it when times get tough. Tip number two would be tracking. So this is something that a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to be obsessed. But what tracking does is it gives you an education around actually how much is in this, so how many calories is in this. And often people say, oh, well, I have a burger, and a burger is this much. And it's like, well, I could make a burger that's 1,000 calories, you could make a burger that's maybe 600 calories. And so having an education around portion sizes, what's in certain foods, how to hit protein, because that's a big thing that people tend to struggle with, provide you with the education and the knowledge to then make the necessary changes to what you want to achieve. And then tip number three would be to create a plan. So don't wing it, right, which is what most people do. Create a plan, but also off the back of that, another thing I think that people sort of try to move away from is try and eat similar things. So maybe not the same thing every day, but have a similar sort of pattern to how you're eating. If we're going into a dieting phase, we're trying to lose weight, although we want sustainability, we're not going to eat in a deficit forever. And so I find for me that when I'm trying to lose weight or drop body fat to term it better, I personally like routine. Because as soon as you open it up to, I could have this, I could have this, I could have this, you're then not really in that strict of a routine. So I like the idea, and I to share this with clients, plan next week on a Friday or a Saturday, reverse engineer it so that you know what meals you want to have. Go and do the shopping on the Saturday or the Sunday or whatever it is. Make sure you're organised there for the week, and you're much more likely to be successful. So you've got a goal, you're educating yourself, and you've got a plan. Would be my three.
Yeah, and it's nice because they're simple steps, but as you say, I can imagine that they're steps that are often missed.
Yeah, I think people think in their heads like, I'll just do a bit better, and very rarely does it kind of go that way because we're so stuck to our habits and routines and the things that we already do, and it's not our fault, it's just our brain's way of trying to make things easier for us, so we have to actively do things that's going to take us away from what we're used to doing.
Yeah, and I like the simple power of setting a goal and making a plan. I think it's kind of like creating a commitment with yourself nearly, isn't it? And that, like, your awareness of that commitment that you've made to the goal, to the plan, I know that I find that really useful when I'm looking to like structure and manage my own behavior. It really helps in those moments where you're tired or you're in a rush
100%.
or where it's just so easy to lose track of the plan.
Yeah, you've got the reason to do it when you don't feel like it, whereas if your goal's a bit like, well, it doesn't really matter that much, you'll jib it off and go back to normal routine or whatever.
Yeah, totally.
All right, so tip two, or top three tips from you, would be to how to make sure that I was trying to phrase this in the right way, so we can't always operate within a growth mindset with every decision that we make, right? Some areas of our life we have more of a growth mindset than others and more of a fixed mindset. But how could we operate more frequently with a growth mindset?
So here, it's similar to what you were saying there around the tracking and how that gives you an awareness, like the knowledge, right? Like the tools to maybe be more aware of the choices you're making with food. Similarly, if we're really serious about implementing a growth mindset more of the time, it's really helpful to understand the framework of like what is a growth mindset actually a little bit better. Because I think we're pretty used to hearing that term or that phrase sort of thrown around, and in my experience, most people don't have a super clear understanding of what exactly that means. So yeah, tip one is to really clarify that for yourself, and I'll give you what I hope is a simple definition now, which is that to operate from a growth mindset means to choose to believe that you can always get better at really kind of anything. Now, note that that's not saying that you can become amazing or really, really masterful or skillful at anything. It's saying that we're choosing to believe that we can get better at anything. Improvement is always possible. And another key component is the belief that it's all about the effort that we put into the process, and importantly, that we be strategic about that effort. And basically what that means is it's not just like showing up to the gym every single day, that would be effort. It's showing up and noticing, okay, that works really well for me. Oh, wow, I've been doing that, but I haven't really been seeing results from it. Or we could apply it to managing calories as well, right? It's about paying attention to what you're doing and noticing the impact of your effort. So noticing what works, what doesn't work so much, and kind of always tweaking the way that you're applying your effort so that you are basically always sort of optimizing the results that you're getting. So it really comes down to that basic framework. But having, I would recommend that everyone pause and think about that, and maybe listen to that a couple of times and really think about, what does that mean? Where am I hoping to apply a growth mindset? It might be multiple parts of your life. It might be one area in particular. So take some time to clarify that for yourself and think like, okay, what does it mean to bring that belief to the table here? What does it mean to use effort, and specifically strategic effort, to keep getting better in this area? And that's going to really, really help to actually, similarly to what we've been saying, like almost create a little bit of a plan around it to support it. So we can think of a fixed mindset as kind of the easy place to fall back into. It's the voice in our head that's saying, no, it's too hard, let's just stop, you can't do it, growth isn't possible, this isn't you. And so in order to stop ourselves from slipping back into a fixed mindset, we need to understand more what a growth mindset is. And as tip number 2, it's also helpful to recognize and be aware of, how does your fixed mindset show up? Because if we can notice we're in a fixed mindset, then we can become aware and try to move ourselves back into the growth mindset. So tip number 2 is start to pay attention to the type of dialogue or the type of self-talk that pops up in your head when you're feeling low on energy, when you're kind of having that feeling of, I can't do it, this isn't working for me. And see if you can just flag that as, okay, that's my fixed mindset self talking. And if we can become a little bit more familiar with what that version of us sounds like, then we can notice and use that as like an opportunity to go, okay, I'm kind of in my fixed mindset here. What would it look like to shift over into more of a growth mindset? And my last tip is to get really interested in learning. So adopt the belief that learning is interesting. Learning is even fascinating, that there's so much to be gained from acknowledging that there's so much left to learn. Sometimes we feel a bit threatened by that. We feel like we're adults, we're supposed to know things. Like I'm supposed to be knowledgeable already, and the idea of going back and being a beginner can be kind of weird and uncomfortable. We don't like it.
Yeah.
But that really stops us from kicking into our growth mindset. So change your mind about that. Decide that you like being a beginner because it means you're learning a lot. And if we can really choose to value learning and the benefits that brings us, to me, that's really the quickest way to access that growth mindset.
I've heard that sort of thing as like a jiu-jitsu or karate metaphor, as in always be a white belt.
Yeah.
So you're always learning, you're always finding new ways of doing it, and operating within a growth mindset, I suppose, isn't just always seeing the positive.
No.
It's also thinking how challenging what's currently happening in a positive way. How can I get better?
Yeah.
Rather than focusing on, I'm not very good at this and I can't get good at this.
Yeah.
So it's asking, comes back to asking good questions, I suppose, as with anything, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I would just add to that often to really implement a growth mindset, we have to be willing to look at what's not working. And so it's interesting to recognize that we can do that in a way that doesn't mean we automatically assume we can't do it. So we can look and go, okay, wow, I've been working really hard at this and I'm not seeing any progress. But if we stay within a growth mindset in that moment, we go, okay, I'm clearly missing some piece of information or strategy, and that's why I can't do it. It's not because I'm not good enough or, there's an issue with my strategy, really.
Yes.
And so then we stay in that growth mindset and we go, okay, what's something I can change? What can I add in? And that enables us to keep moving, even if we've been in kind of like a stuck, difficult place.
Yeah, totally agree. I like how you frame that.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so moving on to your next one. What would your top tips be for achieving a consistent step count?
So this for me is one of the most important things to look at when we're looking at weight loss as well, and it's often ignored. I think people think, okay, eat less and go to the gym, and not to get too much into the sort of science side of this, but this is probably more important in a weight loss sense than the gym.
Yeah.
So it is why we place such a level of importance on it with clients and what have you.
Yeah.
So where I would start with this is kind of where I started previously. Is like we want to have a goal, but the importance with this is let's not overcommit to what that is. So it's very easy to say, right, 10,000 steps, which is like the number that everyone sort of picks out, right?
Totally.
Which, in a lot of cases is a good number to work towards. However, if you're currently doing 2,000 steps, asking you to, 5 times what you're currently doing might be a bit of an ask. And as with any goal, if we are overcommitting, we're likely to under-deliver. So if we can frame it in the other way and under-commit and over-deliver, then we're going to feel much more positive around what we're doing and feel more successful. So for me, if someone's doing currently 2,000 steps per day, maybe I'm going to set them a weekly target of something like 40,000 a week, maybe. All right, which does sound like a big increase, but it's not as big as doing 70,000 a week. And I might ask that person to, really over-deliver on a weekend on the days off. Because during the week, they're working all day, they're sorting the kids out, they're doing this, that, and the other, and it is genuinely really difficult to get to 10,000 steps. You'll know from when you've been sat at a desk all day and gone, oops, I better go for a walk. But not everyone's got the free time and availability to do that.
Yeah.
So I think set a goal, but under-commit and over-deliver. As long as it's more than what you're doing now, it's an improvement, and then you can build on it over time. I think the second piece of this is to also set it as a weekly target. So this would be my second tip. So rather than setting yourself 10,000 steps per day or 7,000 steps per day, the likelihood is that there's going to be days where you can do more than others.
Yeah.
Now, in an ideal world, you keep things fairly, familiar and the same each day.
Yeah.
So when we want to achieve weight loss, ideally calories remain fairly similar, fairly constant. We can get in routine and stuff. It's just not always possible. So if you're someone who's a shift worker, for example, you might stack it up that you've got a weekly target, but it's on your 3 days off or your 4 days off, that maybe you're doing 12, 13, 14, 15,000 days, and if you sat at a desk doing whatever job that you're doing, you might only be getting 3, 4, and 5. But that spanned out over the space of a week equates to whatever target that you hit. So that would be tip number 2. Tip number 3, I would probably say, would be some form of public accountability. So what I've found is I've been doing this recently, and I've been sharing the streak that I'm on. So I'm on day 61 when I get there today, which I will. And I've been sharing that on my Instagram and making a thing of it. And the more I make a thing of it, the more of a thing it is. And a lot of it is for me. I'm kind of sharing that for me because I don't want to break the streak. So I'm making it public that I'm hitting 10,000 steps per day. And I'm adding a little bit of pressure on, but I kind of thrive under that pressure. I like it. So could you invite somebody else to do it with you? Partner, friend, something like that. Someone else that knows that you've got a target or a goal to aim at that's going to bring you with you. Maybe it's a walking partner that you go on a walk with in the evening with dog walks or at the weekend or whatever it might be. But yeah, some form of public accountability I would tell somebody about.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. There's a girl that I follow on Instagram who I think she's on day 600 and something of running every day.
Wow.
Yeah, which I just like find fascinating and so cool. Now, some of those days is just a 1 mile recovery run. So, you know, but she's running every day. And like I can imagine that the accountability of that has been huge for her to maintain that type of consistency.
It just becomes a weight that you don't want to, you know, it's like the chain that keeps growing and growing and you don't want to break it, you know. So I think there's definitely something in that. You have to be okay with eventually something's going to happen. And it's going to stop. You have to be all right with that. And I shared this with a client who'd done like 180 or something, and then had a crazy day at work, fell asleep. It was 11:30 at night, and then he'd missed it, and he was gutted. But the way I framed it is, if you do that again, 2 days out of almost 400 you've missed, which is incredible at the end of the day. So you know, growth mindset. We have to be okay, kind of getting back to it after that.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that the fact that you did all those days in a row is
matter.
now any less significant. Yeah, I agree. It's a really nice add on to that.
100%. Okay,
Very
so
cool.
Keep things moving. Next thing for you is your third one. How are we doing for time? We're doing okay, to be fair. I think we're good to get through them all. So we were sort of discussing how to frame this. But the resistance of getting started. So for someone who's maybe struggled to get started before or started, stop, what would be your top 3 tips for avoiding the resistance or the gravity that's pulling you back into the normal life, I suppose?
Yeah, that resistance is so real. And I think it's important to note that everyone feels that, you know, even people who maybe they're making the change look easy on the outside, you can guarantee they're also feeling some resistance because that's just the way our brain works. Our brain doesn't like change. And so it's always going to exhibit some sort of resistance to doing things differently. And I find that just acknowledging that is really useful in itself. So you don't think, oh God, you know, there's something wrong with me. Why is everyone else finding this so easy and I'm having such a hard time? It's really not the case. Everyone struggles with change, and getting started on a health and fitness journey is a big change. It's a huge change. You know, we often underestimate how much of a change we're expecting of ourselves. We're expecting ourselves to change our routine, change our movement habits, change our eating habits, change the way we maybe relate to our friends and family. There's a lot happening there. So with that in mind, my number 1 tip is to do a personal values exercise. This can be, if you're interested, reach out to Dale or I. We can give you one, or it's not hard to find one online. 10-15 minutes to do this, okay? And maybe you've already done one, and in this case, I'd recommend that you revisit it and maybe update it. So I won't go into the details of it, but essentially doing a personal values exercise allows you to identify the things that are really important to you right now in your life. And once you've done that exercise, I would recommend that you really take a moment to think about how the decision you're making to step into this change, to start a health and fitness journey, is aligned with or reflecting with your personal values. So having that awareness is sort of like it's like building a really powerful why in behind the decision. And it's important that why goes deep enough into our values, because sometimes our initial why is, you know, as you said, Dale, it's okay, well, I want to lose weight, but we've got to dig deeper than that. Why do you want to lose weight? Why is it important to you? Why does it matter? And we need that depth of understanding of our own drive in order to commit to push through that resistance. So definitely recommend that. It's a really powerful thing to do and super interesting too in terms of just learning a little bit more about yourself. So once you've clarified and sort of aligned with those values, the next step is to get very specific about what it is that you want to accomplish, and with the intent of imagining yourself doing those things. So by clarifying what it is you're going to be doing differently or more of or less of, what that then allows you to do is to start imagining yourself doing those things differently. And there's actually a huge power in that, because it allows your brain to like familiarize itself with this new reality, which may sound kind of crazy, but there's a lot of really cool research now that shows that when our brain actively imagines something, it really does build familiarity, and there's a part of our brain that almost doesn't know the difference between us imagining something really in a lot of detail versus us actually doing it. when we build familiarity with something, or in other words, we've done it a few times, then it doesn't feel as weird or different or as uncomfortable, and we feel less resistance to it. It starts to feel like, oh yeah, this is just this thing that I do now. So we can give ourselves a head start by imagining it. A side benefit to this is that it also helps us to actually kind of anticipate some obstacles. So if you start to imagine yourself, okay, I'm going to be going to the gym at this time, and this is what I'm going to be doing, we might actually go, oh, shoot, that conflicts with that, or that's going to be difficult. And that's a good thing to recognize those potential obstacles, because it allows us to start anticipating and maybe even planning for how we want to manage those obstacles. So again, this can sound time consuming, but really you could do this in a minute or a couple of minutes. Once you've got a clear sense of what you're doing, just running through that mental image can be done really quickly. Try and do it as often as possible. So tip number 3 is to really connect with the benefits. Like, try to get yourself excited about what you're about to do. Your brain is going to try and feed you a lot of sort of worst case scenarios or negative self-talk because of the natural negativity bias that our brain has. And so it's really important that we create a positive, energized, excited narrative about the change. We almost want to look for a way to make it a little fun, a little exciting. So tag in with other people who are doing the same thing, create some energy together, tap into the community if there's one available like there is here. Tell people about it, explain it to them in excited terms. So don't tell people, oh God, I have to start this thing next week. Be like, hey, I'm starting this thing next week and I'm excited, and here's what I'm going to be getting out of it. So creating that energy is going to help build the positivity, and that's going to help balance out that natural kind of suspicion that your brain and body has with the change. So yeah, there we go.
Yeah, I think going back to the first one, the realigning the values thing, I think the big one that people will be able to relate to if they run out that exercise would be family, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, I don't really want to exercise. I know I need to lose a little bit of weight, but I could kind of do without it. But it's like, well, can you do without health for your family? Can you do without the energy to look after your family and to be there when you need them? And down the line, as a grandparent, to be able to kneel on the floor with your grandkids and play with them and all that sort of stuff. So I think for me, in terms of values, I'd say most people's going to say family. Yeah. So if people are seeking out, like, what thing could I find that helps me with this, I think that personally is a big one for sure. Yeah,
and even acknowledging health as a value can be a really interesting thing to really say, like, do I value health? And if I do, what does that mean? Can I say I value health and not look after my body? Can I say I value health and not look after my mind? It really kind of brings up some interesting questions. Yeah. And so, that can tie into, explain or clarifying the importance of health can tie into the family value, and it can also be really relevant for someone who maybe doesn't have a family yet, or that's not part of their life plan. So I think that's another one to really reflect on for sure. Yeah, okay, great. So final one for yourself, we're flying through it. Top 3 tips for training.
Okay, so I could give a million, to be fair. There's a lot, right? So it's going to be difficult to get it into 3, to be fair. I think the biggest thing that a lot of people aren't willing to do, because they don't think they need to, is to invest in some education around learning how to train. Yeah. So, for the clients that are listening to this video, you've already done that, so kudos to it. But if you listen to this and you haven't done that, and you think you can just go to the gym and fumble your way around and work it out, you're not going to the same way. You're not going to do that trying to learn the guitar or learn a language or whatever it is that you're trying to do. So invest in some education, or worst case scenario, YouTube's very powerful now. I spend a lot of time on YouTube, watching stuff, listening to stuff, even if it's whilst I'm cooking or getting ready or whatever, just kind of economizing time, I suppose. And there's so much stuff on there, in terms of being able to see visually the exercise and how to do it, and then also kind of the background knowledge that you can learn as well. So for me, if you understand something, you're more likely to know what to do when you're doing it and find a way to enjoy it as well, because you know exactly what it is that you're doing.
Yeah.
So that would be tip number 1. Tip number 2, off the back of that, I would then either get someone to create me a plan, or create a plan myself with the new knowledge that I have. Me knowing pretty much everything that I need to know about training to achieve my goals, if I didn't have a coach, I would still walk into the gym and wing it. And it wouldn't be anywhere close to being as effective. And I've even done it before in terms of writing my own plans and not followed them. I've spent the time like an hour, 2 hours putting them together for like a 6-week plan, and then I've gone to the gym and been like, I'll do it for a week, and then I've just stopped doing it. So I think, first of all, education. Second of all, hire a coach, or worst case scenario, make a plan if you're someone who will follow that plan. And the two of them might be synced together. You might get the education from the coach, or you might build some education first before you go into that, and then go, right, I've heard about this. Can you help me with this specifically? Can you teach me a little bit more about how to deadlift, how to squat, etc.? Then tip number 3, I try and get my clients to think more about performance. So when I related to talking about steps before, being one of the biggest factors in terms of weight loss, I try and relate exercise to kind of being the cherry on the cake. So we're not really going to the gym to lose weight. It's a bit of a boring reason to go, right? And we're going to quickly run out of energy and willpower and motivation to kind of do that. So instead, go to the gym for performance. And that doesn't mean you have to be an athlete, like a 100-meter sprinter or a powerlifter or something like that, but it means that you can recognize progress along the way. So that would come from tracking your workouts, which is tied in with this tip. So whether it be old school pen and paper, whether it be using an app, using the app that I use with clients, but week on week, go and try and get better. Even if it's just 1 second on the treadmill. Or an extra half a kilometer if it's a cardio element. Or if it's just 1 extra rep or slightly heavier on a certain exercise. So that each week that you're going back to the gym, you can know you're getting better. And you've got a reason to go, you feel more successful, and all of a sudden you can start to enjoy it more, rather than thinking it as just a mundane thing that you have to do to burn some calories. When in reality, it's probably the least most important thing for burning calories.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. And I love the advice around performance, because that, to tap into the psychology of that, that's incredibly motivating. If you can track even just little bits of progress, there's something in us that goes, okay, I want to do the next kilometer, or I want to do the next weight. And it's really powerful.
Seeing clients recognize that along the way. I don't even have to the first couple I'm like, oh wow, you've done this, and the next thing is like, oh Dale, wow, I did 14 kilos today on this or whatever. And to me, let's get that nice feeling, when I see that, because I know how happy they are, because I know how happy I am when I recognize a little bit of progress. And what I'm starting to see there is they're finding that reason to train that is not just weight loss. And for me, that's when it's a game changer, and it becomes just something that you do. It's part of your life, because believe it or not, you can grow to enjoy it at least a little bit, or at least when you're there, maybe not the thought of it.
I really do believe that everyone can learn to enjoy exercise. I hold that belief, and I know, some people may not agree with me, but I think that there's something intrinsically in our bodies, and I know that research shows that there is something in our brain that responds in a very positive way to movement and exercise. So if we keep doing it, our brain starts to go, I like this, because it's good for us. So that, I think that's a really nice thing to hang on to, that actually, if I can just keep doing this and build some consistency around it, my brain is actually going to decide that it enjoys it, because it's just designed to do that, which is pretty cool.
100%. I mean, if it was a pill, doctors would have been prescribing it years ago.
Exactly.
But it's not that sexy of a pill, because you actually have to go to the gym and work hard and whatever. But I think the final piece of making it into performance, making it into something where you can recognize progress, is ultimately the biggest reason why people either carry on with it or stop.
I feel like if everyone sat down and took all the tips from this video and implemented even half of them, they would really they'd be doing well. There's been a lot of good stuff in here.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think we've focused on, what we've tried to do here is focus on the key areas, right? So I've kept it simple with the 3 areas for me in terms of diet and step count and then training, right? They're the 3 sort of principal factors. And then for you, we focused in on the key parts of psychology in terms of getting started. So yeah, I think hopefully we've covered some good stuff there, and hopefully it was useful. Hopefully this form of doing it this way was good as well. Yeah, thank you very much for joining us, and for everyone else watching, any feedback would be amazing and much appreciated, and we'll see you all very soon.
Thanks, everyone.